Welcome viewers. Today in this lesson we will be discussing about determinants of organizational structure. Our focus will be on describing three components comprising complexity, compare functional and social specialization, identify the benefits that accrue from the formalization, define socialization, list popular formalization techniques and describe relationship between complexity, formalization and centralization, why organizations might practice decentralization. We will also discuss about how management information systems affect structural dimensions. Organization implies a formal intentional structure of roles and positions. Organizing involves identification and classification of various activities, grouping of those activities necessary to obtain the desired objective, assignment of each group to a manager with authority, that is delegation of power necessary to supervise the task, and provision for coordination amongst the staff in a horizontal distribution or coordinate horizontally on the same or similar organizational level, vertically, for example corporate headquarters, division and department in the organizational structure. So, basically organizing involves identifying and classifying of required activities, grouping activities, assignment of each group to manager, roles and responsibilities, and it emphasizes on collaboration amongst the horizontal and vertical divisions. The steps in organizing process: establishing enterprise objectives, formulating support objectives, the policies, plans, identifying, analyzing and classifying various activities which are necessary to accomplish the goals, grouping activities in the light of human and material resources, distribution of task, distribution of resources available and in a best possible manner under each circumstances and how to optimally utilize them. Delegation to the head of each group the authority which is necessary to perform these activities, tying the groups together horizontally, vertically through authority relationship and information flow. There is a communication channel, there is a described or the formal rules and responsibilities which will bind the various groups together in various roles in their horizontal and vertical capacity. So, based on that we come up with a definition of formal and informal organization. Formal organization is pertaining to intentional structure of roles in a formally organized enterprise. What is formal? Something which is bound by rules, regulations of an organization and which is helping people in different capacities, roles, regulations, the people in different capacities in different roles, different positions to perform as per the organizational objectives. The informal organization is a network of interpersonal relationship that arise when people associate with each other. Informal is something which is not well defined, not well uh, working within the organization's rules regulations, something which is happening because of the better relationship with co-workers and other employees in the organization. 8 elements of organizational design. There are 8 elements which define whether the organization is having a formal or informal subsystem. What are these elements? Elements of organizational designs have been grouped into complementary pairs combined into a design relevant to the company. Organization's redesign starts with only these 4 or 5 changes. So, what are these factors of design elements? These are decisions, motivators, information, structure, norms, commitments, mindsets and networks, which define whether the organization has adopted a formal or informal organizational design. Decisions are how decisions are being made, governance forums, decision rights, decision processes and decision analytics. Motivators are like how people are compelled to perform, what is the monetary reward, career models, talent processes or talent management, acquisition and development processes, information, how the organization formally processes the data, information and knowledge, what are the key performance matrices, indicators which have helped in procuring the data, information and knowledge, information flow within the organization, how does it flow, what is the knowledge management system within the organization, what is the structure, how does the structure or how work and responsibility is being divided within the organization, hierarchy and reporting relationship, the focus on roles, responsibilities, the focus on the various business processes working in the organization. Then we move towards the next factor, which is called norms. How people instinctively act or take action. What are the values and standards followed? Expectations and unwritten rules, regulations, expected behavior. Commitments, how people are inspired to contribute, how do people contribute to the organization, how are they committed, what is the shared vision and objective, individuals goals and aspirations, how they are aligned with the organizational goals and objectives, what is the source of pride, whether it is internal source of internal motivator, what is the sense of pride of working for the organization, what is the level of commitment, the mindset of people, like how people make sense for their work, whether it is through their job, the identity, the shared language, the belief, the organization's culture, assumptions and biases, mental models, what are the networks within the organization, how people connect beyond the lines and boxes, conversations and collaborations, teams and other working units which influence each other, organizational influence. So, based on these elements of organizational designs, we decide whether the organization has formal rules and regulations or whether it is informal. Organizational roles, for roles to exist and be meaningful, it must incorporate objectives, verifiable objective which are major part of planning. Every plan will come up with a kind of a well defined objective or goals, a clear idea of major roles, duties or activities which are involved, and an understood area of discretion or authority, a clear authority, so that the person taking up that role knows what he or she can do to accomplish, what skills, competencies are required to accomplish that goal. Organizational structure, the form of organization that is evident in the way divisions, departments, functions and people link together and interact. Structure reveals vertical operational responsibilities, horizontal linkages within the departments may be represented by an organizational chart. The complexity of organization structure is often proportional to the size and the geographical dispersal or the division of responsibility. There are forms of work coordination, a division of labor, informal communication, formal hierarchy and standardization. What is division of labor? Division of labor, subdivision of work into separate jobs which are assigned to different people. It potentially increases efficiency of workers. If you work repeatedly, so your efficiency improves because you become more, you develop expertise in that area. Necessary as company grows, it is very important to emphasize on the efficiency as the company grows and work becomes more complex. And informal communication is sharing of information, high media richness, importance on teams, integrating roles in larger firms. Formal hierarchy is direct supervision and common in large firms. There are problems like costly, slow, less popular today with the workforce. And what is standardization? Standardized processes, that means formal guidelines, rules, regulations are well defined, and output is, there is a clear output, clear goal, and outputs are measured based on certain well defined matrices or certain parameters which are fixed, like for example, for the quality, what is the level of quality to be maintained, how much error is to be reduced, and what is the focus on the output, like how many defects per million. So there are clear goals, clear output measures. Skills are training, learn, precise role behavior, and so on. So these are forms of work coordination. Span of control emphasizes on number of people directly reporting to the next level, assumes coordination through direct supervision, wide span of control, possible with other coordinating mechanisms. The trends towards a flat structure. Nowadays, there is more focus on a flat, flexible structure which emphasizes on reducing cost, put decision makers closer to the frontline executives or to the frontline information. Meeting the decision makers are very close to the customers, clients, so that they can directly incorporate the feedback into improvising the processes and products. Supports empowerment. The problem is with risk of cutting too much of middle management. There, if you reduce the level of management, the there are certain roles, responsibilities which are very specialized, and then that would be one of the problems of cutting too much of middle management. The next element of organizational structure is formalization. Formalization means the degree to which organizations standardize behavior of employees, streamline the behavior of people through standardized rules, procedures, formal training and related mechanisms. How much they are adopting or abiding by the norms and procedures of the organization. Formalization increases as firms get older, larger and more regulated. New organizations may not have acquired the rules and regulations, but as the organization progresses, as the organization becomes more stable, the rules regulations are well in place and people adapt to the rules and regulations. Organizations during its orientation programs makes very clear the rules, formal rules, regulations which are expected to which are expected by every employee to abide by. The problem of formalization increases as the firms get older, larger and more regulated. The problems of formalization is it reduces organizations flexibility, agility, work rules can undermine productivity, employees feel disempowered. If they are too much guided by the rules regulations, they feel their creativity is lost and they are not able to generate new ideas. So, too much of rigidity, too much of formalization can always reduce the creativity, can reduce decision making of employees. Problem solving skills also declines, rules become focus of attention. So, centralization and decentralization is another element which forms organization structure. Centralization is the formal decision making authority is held by few people or is bestowed with the top management. Usually at the top management the decision lies. In decentralization, decision making authority is dispersed throughout the organization. People in different capacities are also given power to take decision, to give their consent, to give their views. Then based on elements of organizational design like formalization, centralization, span of control and division of labor, the organization is able to form different types of organizational designs. Like organization basically forms a mechanistic structure or organic structure. So these design elements help in forming structure of organizations. Narrow span of control, high formalization, high centralization are characteristics of mechanistic structure. For an organic structure, there is a wider span of control, less formalization and little formalization or less formalization and a decentralized decision making. What is the relevance of complexity and its importance? Complexity refers to degree of differentiation within an organization. Horizontal differentiation, degree of horizontal separation between units based on orientation of members, nature of task they perform and their level of education and training. Most visible form of differentiation is vertical differentiation like depth of organizational hierarchy, Special differentiation, degree to which location of an organization, facilities and personnel are dispersed geographically in different departments. An increase in any one of these factors will increase the organization's complexity. Large number of occupations within an organization require specialized knowledge and skills, increases complexity in an organization. Complexity is the degree of differentiation that exists within an organization. Differentiation may be horizontal, vertical, spatial, and horizontal differentiation is the degree to which differentiation is based on members' orientation, nature of task, and they perform, and education and training of individuals. The most visible evidence of horizontal differentiation is specialization and departmentalization. What is departmentalization? There are different departments, designation in areas, division or branches over which a manager has authority, for which performance of specialized activities. Effects of departmentalization. It establishes chain of command. There is a clear line of supervision, supervised structure. It creates common mental models and measures of performance, encourages staff to coordinate through informal communication. Vertical differentiation refers to the depth in the structure. As differentiation increases and hence the complexity, the number of hierarchical levels in the organization increases. Determining factor is span of control, that is number of subordinates that a manager can directly oversee or can directly or supervise. The principle of span of management states that there is a limit to the number of subordinates or managers can effectively supervise. Exact number depends on the impact of underlying factors. Organizations with narrow span will have close supervision of employees. There are more number of levels in the organization, and the top management is able to oversee a large number of employees with many levels, whereas in a wider span it is assumed that employees have uh, power to take decisions, they are knowledgeable, they have skills, competencies to take decisions. So, there is less supervision or control is required. So, organizations with wider span, one employee, the supervisor, is supervising a large number of people under him. Contrasting a span of control, members in the larger span will have large number of employees. On the other hand, in a situation where the span of control is the span is wider, will have less managers, will have levels are very less. Contrasting span of control, when you look at the larger span and when you look at a wider span of control will have less number of managerial levels, whereas on the other hand there are more number of managerial levels in a narrow span of control. What determines an effective span of management? A narrow span is a deal of time spent with subordinates. A narrow span, what are the typical characteristics? Little or no training in a narrow span, inadequate or unclear authority delegations, unclear plans for non-repetitive objectives, non-repetitive operations, non-verifiable objectives and standards, the fast changes in external and internal environment, use of poor and inappropriate communication techniques including vague instructions, ineffective interaction of superior and subordinates, ineffective meetings, and there is a greater number of specialities at lower and middle management level. Incompetent and untrained managers, there is a complex task which people cannot take up. Subordinates are unwilling to assume responsibilities and reasonable risk, and immature subordinates. So, let us discuss about what determines an effective span of control, span of management. What are the factors which decides whether the organization will have a narrow or a wider span? When the subordinate has little or no training when the subordinate is not adept to take decision, inadequate or unclear authority or delegation, when the line of command is not very clear, authority is not very clear, under that circumstances the span of control will be narrow. When the plan is not very clear for non-repetitive operations, the non-repetitive or new task is not possible to be taken up by the subordinate when the plan is unclear, non-verifiable objectives and the standards. The standards are not very clear, objectives are not well defined. There is a fast change in the business environment, internal and external environment. In under such conditions, the span of control can be narrow. Use of poor or inappropriate communication techniques like including vague instructions, not very clear cut instruction has been given. Ineffective interaction of superior and subordinates, ineffective meetings. There is also greater number of specialities at lower and middle levels. So, under such circumstances the span will be narrow. Incompetent and untrained managers, when the managers are not very competent to take up challenges, there is a complex task and which requires, which there is also risk in accomplishing that task. Subordinates unwillingness to assume responsibility and reasonable risk in the given task. There is immature subordinate, when the subordinates are not very mature, not very confident, under such circumstances the span will be narrow. How do we decide when the span of control will be wider? When there is the subordinates are thorough and well trained, there is a clear cut delegation of well defined task, clear delegation to undertake a well defined task. When there is a clarity about what is the objective, well defined plans for repetitive operations, verifiable objectives are used as standards, and there is a slow change to in external and internal environment. Use of appropriate techniques with a proper organizational structure, written and oral communication, effective interaction between superior and subordinates, effective meetings, and greater number of specialities at upper level like top managers concerned with external environment. There are competent and trained managers. The task is very simple, subordinates willingness to assume responsibility, and there is also reasonable risk in the task, and mature subordinates, when the subordinates are confident, mature, independent to take decisions, and they are also risk takers. Under such circumstances we can go for a wider span of control. Now the focus is on what is spatial differentiation. An organization can perform the activities with same degree of horizontal differentiation and hierarchical arrangement in multiple locations. It refers to the degree to which location of an organization's office, plants and personnel are dispersed geographically. Why complexity is very important? Why is it important to discuss about organization and complexity? The more complex an organization is, the greater there is a need for effective communication, coordination of activities and controlling various activities or devices. As complexity increases, complexity in terms of the complex task or complexity in the business environment. So, to demand the management is to make sure that differentiated and dispersed activities are working effectively, smoothly, there is coordination and together to working towards achieving the organizational goals. Now, let us focus on what is formalization, few more elements like formalization, socialization, formalization techniques and centralization, decision making process, reasons for decentralization and how re-engineering happens in organization. So, just giving a view of what is formalization. Formalization refers to degree to which jobs within the organization are standardized. If a job is highly formalized, the job incumbent has minimum amount of discretion over what to be done, when is to be done and how he or she should do it. When it refers to the jobs, degree of formalization varies widely within and among organizations. Organizations use formalizations because the benefit accrue from regulating employees' behavior. Formalization, formal rules regulations help in molding or shaping the behavior of employees. Standardization behavior reduces variability. There will be standardized procedures to be adopted. And socialization is adaptation procedure by individuals uh, learn from values, norms, expected behavior, patterns for the job and the organization of which they are part of. Socialization is an adaptation process by which individuals learn from the cultural norms, values and expected behavior patterns for the organization and the organization of which they are part of. Formalization techniques are selection. An effective selection process will be designed to determine if the job candidates that is fit into the organization. A good employee is defined as one who will perform his or her job in a very satisfactory manner and also whose personality, work habits, and attitudes align with the organizational desires. We generally call it as selecting people who fit with the organization's values, who exhibit or who are able to fit to the organization's uh, the designation as well as organization job fit or organizations or person job fit, person organizational fit, person organization's culture fit. So, the selection procedure is one where an effective selection process will be designed to determine if the job candidates fit into the organization, if they are a right fit. A good employee is defined as one who will perform his or her job in satisfactory manner and also whose personality fits, whose work behavior, habit and attitudes align with the organizational objectives and desires. So, there will be a sync of a person's behavior, attitude with the organization's value system, the various job and activities as well as the organization's culture. Role requirement, individuals in organizations fulfill different roles. Every job carries with it certain expectations or how the role incumbent is supposed to behave. Rules, procedures, and policies. Rules are explicit statements that tell employees and uh, what he or she rules, procedures, and policies are explicit. Rules, procedures, and policies. Rules are explicit statements that tell an employee what he or she ought or ought not do, what is expected from an employee. Procedures are established to ensure standardization of work processes. The same input is processed in the same way and output is the same each day. Policies provide greater leeway than the rules. Rather than specifying a particular and specific behavior, policies allow employees to use discretion but within the limited boundaries. Formalization techniques, training. Many organizations provide training to employees. This includes the on the job training, where understudy assignments, coaching, and apprenticeship models are used to teach employees preferred job skills, knowledge, and attitude. It also includes off the job training such as lectures, demonstrations, simulation exercises, and programmed instructions. Rituals are formalization techniques with members which have a strong and enduring impact on organization. Now, let us focus on what is centralization. Let us discuss about the formal authority or the decision making power. Where does it lie? Centralization refers to the degree to which decision making is concentrated on a single point in the organization. Low concentration indicates low concentration indicates low centralization, or it may be called decentralization. If there is a higher concentration of power in the top management, it is called highly centralized. Decision making is presented traditionally as making of choices. After developing and evaluating at least two alternatives, decision making chooses a preferred alternative. What is decision making? If there is a situation, the information is taken or information input which is interpreted and advice is sought, and there are various alternatives or choices being generated which will lead to execution of an action. Reasons of decentralization: organizations need to respond rapidly to changing conditions. At the point in which change is taking place, an organization which is facing a dynamic environment, there has to be more of decentralization, because the organization need to be adaptive to the changing preferences of the external environment. Decentralization facilitates speedy action rather than seeking the support from the top management, or moving for or looking forward for the final say from the top management. Decentralization facilitates speedy action because it avoids the need to process the information through the vertical hierarchy. It will not hold the information for a longer period of time. It will fasten the process of information dissemination, and decision making becomes more quicker. Decentralized decision making can provide motivation to employees, because employees see the task getting faster by allowing them to participate in the decision making. Every person who has the who is in a responsibility, who is a process owner, who is taking care of the task to get or the goals to accomplish, has a final say in giving his or her voice. And so they see that when their voice is being heard, when they have a say in getting the final work done, so there is an increased motivation of employees, the commitment level of employees goes up. A final uh, a final point of decentralization is the training opportunity that it creates for lower level managers. So, an advantage of decentralized decision making is the training given to employees, consciously or unconsciously, because they are carrying out the task and they have an onus or responsibility for execution of the task. So, it creates a kind of confidence, it increases the level of confidence of low level managers. Now, moving forward, we will discuss about under what circumstances organizations restructure or re-engineer. Yes, as organizations, we started the discussion with a responsive organization, an organization to be sustainable. In order to sustain the turmoil in the business environment, the complexities, the dynamism, the vulnerability and uncertainty in the external environment, uncertainty, then ambiguity in the business environment, those organizations which have been very flexible, which have a shorter span of control, which have focused on decentralization, which are agile or flexible, are able to sustain and survive, and they are having or they will be able to reach their objective and the goals in a very competitive business environment. Those organizations, they are learning organizations, they are responding, they have a team based work culture, they have more focus on responsibility, they are more focus on sharing of information and knowledge, and they also give emphasis on talent management and development. So, these organizations do not retain the same structure, they re-engineer, they reconfigure based on the changing dynamics of the business. Fundamental rethinking and radical redesign of the business processes to achieve improvements in contemporary measures of performance such as cost, the concern for quality, service and speed of transactions. Key aspects of re-engineering: the concept has been given by Hammer and Champy, and fundamental rethinking of what the organization is doing and why. There is a radical redesign of business process like downsizing, takes various shapes like downsizing, right sizing, not the primary purpose of re-engineering, but in many cases it results in a fewer people, less number of people, And the fourth keyword in reengineering is need for carefully analyzing and questioning the various business processes. Once formulated, we should not ignore the signals in the business environment, but continuously transform the business processes so that the organization will be mostly competitive and will survive the vulnerability, uncertainty, dynamism of the business environment, the complexity. So, which will be able to produce the outputs in terms of better quality of product, services, profit, satisfaction, goal, and integration. Goal will be and better goals. So, we have discussed about, in this section we have discussed about organizational structure. We started with understanding the components of complexity, then we have compared functional and social specialization. We discussed about what is organizing, the various steps of organizing process, the formal and informal organizations. We discussed about the elements of organizational designs, the formal and informal. We have focused on decisions, motivators, information structure, norms, commitments, mindsets and networks, organizations roles, structure, the division of labor, various forms of coordination, division of labor, information, informal communication, formal hierarchy, standardization, span of control, formalization, centralization, and we finally discussed about how these design elements have led to the two basic forms of organizational designs, mechanistic and organic, complexity and its importance in organizational, the uh, organizational, the complexity and how it helps in forming differentiation, horizontal, vertical and special organizational structure. What is departmentalization? We discussed about the span of control and what makes the difference between narrow and wider span of control. And finally, we have discussed about what determines an effective span of management. Fin Concluding the discussion, we have discussed about formalization techniques, centralization, decision making and decision making process, and finally, how does an organization re-engineer. Thank you.